Hi everybody, welcome to another online question and answer. And today, just to review a couple of things, we started filming another class today with Jimmy. I don't know if anybody out there who's watching now has taken a class, has taken that first class with Jimmy, but we had a fun time. And Jimmy did an ottoman that came out really nice. Jimmy's a beginner. I would say he's an advanced beginner, maybe even intermediate. He's taken the class, my other classes, a few times in the Boston area. He's a good guy, and this is his chair that we've made a couple of discoveries on. So what I want to do to start is going to call Jimmy in and ask him if he's got any questions himself. So come on in, Jimmy. Thanks for sticking around.
No problem, Kevin.
Nice
Glad to be back again.
Yeah. So this was an interesting, I would call this an arts and crafts chair.
Okay, what's...
Well, it's just that's the time for, this a little, it's hard to distinguish this because it has the Queen Anne legs, which is traditional, but these flat arms remind me of arts and crafts in that,
Okay.
30s, 40s era.
Yeah, the long, relaxing style, is that what you mean?
Yeah,
okay.
A little bit more relaxed. But we found some interesting things on this today, didn't we? We're giving you a little preview of these online
Well,
classes.
I was surprised with the springs underneath this on
Let's
the
show
seat.
them that.
Okay. I was actually expecting webbing with the springs. I wasn't expecting a frame like you see here at all. So obviously they doubled up on the frame and dropped this in to support.
And that's
the whole
what it's
thing.
called. It's called a drop-in unit, and
Okay.
it's metal to metal. And so there's a couple of things about this that that I'd explain. Metal to metal usually isn't a good idea because that creates noise. So oftentimes to overcome that, which they didn't have, you could put a little cotton batting in between there to eliminate the noise. We see that a lot. And also this metal is actually does too good of a job. It doesn't allow the springs to relax enough down, whereas the webbing would. You've seen webbing that we've used before. And so what that means is that the top of the seat's not compromised. The bottom of the seat would be. And that just would mean an easier repair for the consumer.
Okay.
So we learned a lot about this chair. It looked like a very simple chair coming in, but
Yes,
what do you
I
think?
thought so. I wasn't sure how many times it had been reupholstered, so I thought, well, maybe 2 on the outside, but it looks like maybe 3, possibly. And it's been, probably a good 60-year-old chair. And, we're finding out that the material was still left on it.
Yeah, let's show them that. Show them a little bit of the material. The old material's still up there. Right here. It's synthetic or fake tapestry, right?
Yeah, kind of an older paisley style, but it's, it's a good material. At the time, it was you can tell that it's very durable.
Very quality fabric.
Yeah.
And before we go any further, I just want to ask Michaela, are there any questions, Michaela? So this is what we got this live show all set up for, questions that you might have while you're watching the show, or your show that you've signed up for. So we'll continue, Jimmy. So what I'm going to do is turn this around, and I'm going to face the back. So what we discovered when Jimmy took off the back of this, so you want to describe what you found, Jimmy, on the back?
Well, what was that, opening up the whole back of it here, the trimming had the metal trimming.
Yeah,
all
the
way
metal is
around.
called a ply grip, and I'm going to talk a little bit about these materials that we use today.
And I was kind of surprised again with that. I wasn't sure, even with the chair being reupholstered, how old this particular job was done. It could have been 20 plus years ago.
That was the most recent reupholstery job that they used a modern material.
Which is surprising. This is really a mixture of a lot, it seems like to me.
Yeah.
But also, they did not put any webbing as a support. They used a cheap synthetic support with foam in the back of it, like this.
That was one of the reupholsterings.
Yes.
And originally, we noticed something else, that they did have some webbing and burlap, but they didn't have a lot of webbing. They only had one webbing coming down and one coming across.
Yeah, and to me that's, you're kind of leaning back. There should be some
Yeah.
firmness to your back at all.
Or
I'm surprised.
more so that it lasts longer. And one of the pleasant surprises we found that horsehair.
Yes, the
Yeah.
biggest surprise of all. I wasn't sure how this all was coming together. I hadn't
Yeah.
seen horsehair in years.
So we're gonna reuse that horsehair.
Yes, we will. I
Yeah.
love. I haven't seen that in a long time. I wonder because it's being so matted on the other side, how much it actually is embedded with the cotton.
Well, yeah, the cotton goes over. So the unique thing about horsehair, it is expensive though. That's one unique thing that is expensive, I guess. So there's another unique thing, and that is that they're little short hairs. They're from the body of the horse, not from the mane
Mm-hmm.
and not from the tail. Everyone thinks they're from the tail and the mane. They don't kill the horse to thank goodness to make this horsehair. It's shaves. The horses are shaved, so it's body hair. But these hairs are really short like this, and they're very curly and very springy.
Okay.
So every one of those hairs is like a little mini coil spring. And that's what makes it such a unique batting. It's probably the most unique, best batting for upholstery that you can ever
But they
have.
don't do that anymore.
No, and there are replacements, which I'm going to talk about a little bit.
Okay.
And as I'm talking, so let's finish up on this. So you took this piece off that was an old repair,
Yes.
and then we started to discover that you're into a restoration here rather than a reupholstering like the other 4 upholsterers did.
Surprise!
That's a big surprise because it's more work.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Well, again, like I say, it's a matter of the last upholstery job with the previous probably 2 jobs with the way that all this was put together, and so now basically we're all on a stripped down mode with regard to getting everything, all the staples, all the materials, and rebuilding it right back up.
Yeah, and that's a process, isn't it?
Yes. So I'm going to be here for a while.
Yeah. Well, we're enjoying it. There are 5 more classes in your semester coming up, and I think that you're going to finish this.
Oh, okay.
I have confidence that you will.
Yeah, I like to think that it's going to come along. It's actually it's going to be have to be stripped down. The frame itself has to be redone as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do a little gluing on it, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I think it has to be a little bit of reinforcement with some of this.
Actually, our strategy is going to be that when you strip this down and clean it all up,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe or maybe not, we haven't determined on the seat yet.
Okay.
We may end up, doing a restoration on that too.
Wow.
But at that point, it might be a good time, as much of the material that's off, and then would be a good time to reglue it, what you need to do before you start with the fabric.
Right. Right. Instead
So,
of midstream.
It's quite a process. We're going to learn a lot. For all you guys if anybody's watching, they're wondering if they want to sign up for the class. This is a really interesting project. This is going to be upcoming, not right away. This is a really interesting project. I just want to show the people at home one other thing. So this is an open armchair, which looks simple enough, but it actually presents little technical problems for you as the upholsterer. Jimmy.
Of course it does.
Yeah, you picked you look at this chair and you say, oh, it's an easy chair, I'll have that done.
I did say, everyone said, oh, looks good to do, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fat chance.
Yeah. So what the unique thing is that you have to create, a side seat, 2 side seats, and a front seat, whereas most furniture is just a front seat. And you have the arms are closed like this.
Right.
So what that means is that you can do some, with the arm closed, when you bring your material through,
Right.
you could do some, some real stretching and tweaking, and you don't have to worry too much about it. But with this is visible, it's seen, and it has to look really neat. Mm-hmm. And it has to, in some cases, if you're picking a stripe or something, it has to match the border on the cushion, like this
Okay.
way.
Well.
So that presents another problem. Actually,
We have the materials.
why don't you bring your fabric out that you selected? Let's take a look at
Where
that.
is it? Where's
It's
it?
out on the table over there.
All right, let me
Jimmy's
get-
gonna go grab. Do we have any questions? Don't feel free to ask. Okay. We did have a question come in though on email, and while Jimmy's going to get his fabric, he's going to come over here. I want to talk about that. Somebody asked a very good question about staple guns, and this staple gun that I use, it's a BEA, but it doesn't tell the story about what the unique part of this staple gun is. And this is a low pressure working staple gun. That's very important when you're working off an air compressor. So what that means is that, if you don't know, that means that on the low cycle, like right before the machine's going to be turned on, or a couple of minutes before the compressor is going to be turned on to build up the air pressure again, this gun performs under that low pressure. That's so important. Most guns that are sold do not operate like that. So what happens with most guns that are sold, most guns will start jamming at that low, it's on the low cycle, the low pressure cycle that they start jamming. And you have no idea when you're working, you have no idea when that is. So what happens with that is your gun jams and then you go taking out the staple and your hammer, which is inside, starts to, deteriorate. So this is, I highly recommend this. That was a great question that somebody had by email. We do get a lot of questions by email. And but this is set up for you guys right now to ask live questions, and so feel free. So, Jimmy, let's take a look at your fabric. So I have it nice and tightly wrapped up there with a piece of duct tape.
Yeah, you should get a job as a package handler now.
But we don't have to take too much of this out. So what I do notice is that you have a stripe-like fabric.
Okay.
So it's okay. We'll manage. It's a little bit more difficult, and I think you're ready for a challenge, and that's your challenge, to try to get this matched. So you do have to pay attention to that. So if you look at this fabric's going to run this way on Jimmy's chair, okay? And then when he gets to the seat over here, it's going to run up like this, okay? So that means that your boxing on your cushion should match these vines. So you have two different colored vines here, right? And then you're going to pick one of those vines to use as a center point and then use that throughout the chair.
Oh, okay.
So, people will be able to see that.
So when you talk about the one vine that I'm going to pick from, that piece will go in the front and use it as a guide to around the front of the chair?
That's right. We're going to measure the whole chair out.
Okay.
Get all our measurements, every measurement, and then we're going to get it on paper, then we're going to bring it to the table, and we're going to put the measurements next to the fabric. And then we're going to work it out mathematically how this is going to be done. And then as you're cutting, with our measurements that we're going to check 2 or 3 times, by the way, before we cut.
Yes, because
and then you're going to dress the chair up. With each piece that you cut, you're going to bring it over and put it on the chair and see how it looks, and even pin it on if you want. It's called dressing the chair, or the sofa, whatever you have. But I think that this is a fine fabric. How many yards did you get?
8, I believe I got.
So that's more than enough. You know
Yes.
that, right? And you got extra, right?
I always get extra.
So it brings up an interesting point about fabric. I'm just going to put this down for a minute just to let you know, Jimmy. You can stick around.
I will stick around.
Yeah. Jimmy's got all the questions. Maybe Jimmy's asking so many good questions that maybe people don't need to ask them when they're watching, right? So we'll bring this over here. Take a look at this. Now, I'm just going to go grab my tape measure. I don't actually use a tape measure when I'm measuring. Let's talk a little bit about how do you get yardage. It's a big question that people have. People are always asking me, how do you figure yardage out? It's always good to know what type of fabric. Like you had a stripe that needs to be matched. It might take a little bit of percentage more for that than it would a solid fabric, right?
Kind of like the ottoman.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The ottoman was a straight pattern. No.
Pretty much a straight. It had a small pattern. Jimmy's ottoman had a small pattern. It was probably like less than an inch. So when you get into patterns like that, it's not, and it's a darker fabric. We talked a little bit about this. It makes no difference about matching. You don't have to pay attention to it. Okay. Okay, especially your fabric. Some fabrics you don't. This fabric, obviously, they needed to pay attention to the center point, and I guess they did. I guess they were pretty close on that one. You get a tape measure, though. Just hold on 1 second. Just 1 second, Jimmy. So measuring fabric for beginners, you might want to use a tape measure. For me, what I do is I work it out in my head. I'll explain that now, right? Okay. So when I look at a cushion, on a chair, for this chair in particular, cushions usually are 1.5 yards. Okay. So 1.5 yards, or 1.5, right? Yeah. Your seat is another at least 1 yard. Okay. So that's a 2.5. Your back, you get into backs like this, I could say another yard for the back and be at 3.5. I would round it out to 4. So I would say on this chair here, with the piping maybe, I would say 4 to 5 yards of fabric. Okay. 4 to 5 yards.
Yeah, there was some, I found when I did this, there was piping on the corner to give it a little bit.
Yeah, you need that piping, so that's extra fabric. So 4.5 yards, I felt I would feel confident with. 5 yards is a little bit too much. You got 8, which is great in case you
Yeah.
make a mistake or you want something else done. Now, professionally, if you guys are going into, we have a question. So let's take a question from somebody out there in YouTube land.
This is from Anne. When you buy a fabric, how do you count in? With line or motifs?
Can you repeat that?
When you buy a fabric, how do you count in? With line or motifs?
With line or more, I think what she's asking, Jimmy, is what is the additional, and if I'm wrong, Ann, let me know. But I think what she's asking is how much of a percentage more fabric do you need if you have a large motif or a repeat? I think that's what she's asking.
Okay.
That's a very good question if that's what she's asking. We had a Marimekko fabric come in. Actually, I can show it to you. Hold on one second. This is a beautiful fabric from Finland. Look at that, huh? Jimmy, why don't you hold that up there? Look at that. That you talk about a huge repeat. And,
Oh my
and the
God.
customer had
Wow.
2 small chairs that were being done on this. And the customer wanted me to match it. And this guy here, he repeats, I think he was a yard away. So obviously when you have something like this, you need to factor that in as more yardage, right?
I wouldn't even know where to begin. How would you get it all? How big was the chair? How big was
Very
the...
small chairs. They were fully upholstered chairs, but they were very small, and I just barely got this in, you know. She was very specific about what she wanted as a center point. So it was a very challenging job. Took up a lot of waste, you know.
Oh, I'm sure it was all
So
that.
it's a good question, Ann. Usually anything under a 15-inch repeat. Let's start with this, Jimmy, right?
Okay.
This repeat right here, from here to here, is probably about 9 inches.
Okay.
So with that's a small repeat, and most of your upholstery fabrics are going to be small repeats, and you don't have to be concerned with that when you're factoring it in. So the 4.5 that I said on this, or 5, would be perfect for up to a 14 or 15-inch repeat, believe it or not.
Okay.
So it's not until you start getting into your drapery fabrics. You know, in the 90s, what happened in the 90s is the decorators who took all the wall fabric, all the drapery fabric. They said, "Hey, upholsterer, I want this on the sofa. Wouldn't that look nice?" Well, the only problem with that is most drapery fabrics designed to be repeated on a big piece of fabric, like up a
Right.
wall. So, but then you take that and you take it onto a piece of furniture, which is scaled smaller, obviously. It was up to us as upholsterers, which we very skillfully did, work the fabric like this. You know, this isn't designed to go on really on furniture.
I mean, even on something like this, it wouldn't look.
This would be tough, you know, but it would look great. We would make it work.
But isn't it true that when sometimes you had a drapery, like say that style, that you had probably like a sister material to it that was smaller, so they would, if you were thinking of
They have
matching
complementary fabrics.
Right.
You know, like if a salesperson's selling you a fabric, they might sell you a solid with this for your piping and things like that, which sometimes makes a difference in the job.
Okay.
Makes it look better with the contrast piping.
Okay.
I don't do a lot of contrast pipings, but let's get back to what I think Ann's question was, which was how much percentage do you add? So if you have something that's 4.5 like this, you know, I think the client, if you have a 36-inch repeat, for instance, like this, the client would have to expect 7 yards, you know, six yards or 7 yards. Because I'd want that, I need that on the top and the bottom of the cushion, that big motif.
Right.
And I need to make sure this makes sense, so it might require going really deep into the fabric to do that. And then I need it on the inside and the outside back, believe it or not. So I'd say
Yes.
6. I'd say 6. The other thing about estimating fabric professionally, for people out there, is that you're competing with other upholsterers, so you have to be really smart and good with your fabric amounts, because fabric's expensive, and that
Yes.
could throw somebody's budget off. So you have to be careful with how you estimate things.
Yeah. So if
So
simple.
sometimes the tape measure comes out. So for instance, on a back like this, I take my, most fabrics are 54-inch widths. So if you can get 2 out of a width, that's a good thing. So Jimmy, I'm going to ask you to hold the tape measure there to about 1 inch to the back of that chair, and let this go for a second. Let's just measure this. So this is 29. That's what I would need for that, right?
Okay.
So if I measure the outside back, if I can get 2 out of a width, that's how I would look at that. So this is 24. So it's 53, right?
Yep.
54. Just barely would I get this out of a width of fabric, as long as the fabric's running the right way, which we can talk a little bit about that. Fabric can also be run sideways. It's a little bit more complicated, but let's just stick with the 54-inch width. So when you look at this back, you could say, you know, I'm not too worried about the vertical. You could say 1 yard of fabric would do the inside and the outside back.
Okay.
So when you're talking to a client, you could say, well, let me see if I could save you some fabric, you know, and then you would try to work it out with the tape measure. Sometimes the tape measure comes out to get a closer measurement for somebody who's looking at a very expensive fabric. Actually, I want to show you a very expensive fabric right now. It's very nice. I think it's over $200 a yard. Let me just get that. Yeah.
Oh.
Jimmy, is that a little bit out of your budget?
Oh, well, it might be, you know.
So this is a Brunswick tea. This is beautiful. I can't wait to get my dibs on this with the project. It's going to be a beautiful wing chair.
Wow.
Look at that, huh?
Now, what is this made of?
This is an imported, I'm not sure where, but we got a Brunswick Fee, which is a very nice high-end company. And this is a beautiful silk fabric.
Okay.
And this is going to be beautiful on a wing chair that we have in the shop that I can't get to right now. So isn't that, would look nice on your chair, Jimmy.
Well, I don't know. But I have a question, though, regarding the material.
Yeah, what is it?
What is it made of? Because it doesn't feel like a...
This is silk.
This is silk.
This is silk.
Now,
This is a cotton, a high cotton that you had on here before.
Okay.
And there's some synthetic in that, not much,
Okay.
because the era was where they were just starting to come out with synthetics.
Okay.
So you might have a very raw synthetic, but mostly cotton in that. And this is a cotton cloth and and silk.
With a wingback chair with that material,
Yeah.
how much longer or what care do you have to take for that to be staying?
This is not going to last. You know, this particular fabric's not going to be heavily used, and so that was the process that they were using.
Okay, so
So
all right.
there's
And
not going
then-
to be 100 kids jumping on it. If there
100
were, I would be worried.
Well,
about
I
it.
think you should be saying excuse me, but
That's right.
so basically you'd be saying like a durable chair. You'd be thinking of a heavier material, cotton, and like you say, the little
bring
bit of-
up a great question. I'm just going to ask if anybody has any more questions out there. Feel free to ask. But on fabrics, they have what they call in the industry a double rub test, where there's a machine that just rubs the fabric. You know,
Okay.
a new fabric that's coming up, they'll test it with this machine. And you know, if you got 100,000 rubs, double rubs, that's a great material.
Okay.
Some of them go up to 200,000. Some commercial grade fabrics. But beware, some of the fabrics they sell in manufacturers have probably a 2,000 double rub. It's hardly anything, or 5,000 double rubs. They're not really interested in letting fabric last a long time when they're selling you new furniture, because they want to sell you more new furniture.
Yeah, exactly.
So upholsterers have a wholly different take on fabrics and their work, and the two of them together. We want something to last 100 years. No kidding. And that's possible if you have a really good fabric and you have a really good skill behind it, which you're developing, Jimmy.
Okay.
So we can't wait to get moving on this. Do you have any other more questions?
No, I actually, the care of the horsehair, what should I do when I have it? Is there anything I should be doing with the horsehair?
Do you have a barn? No, I'm just
no.
kidding.
I could build one. Actually, that's on my other show.
You don't have to build a barn for your horsehair, but you do for your horse. But the horsehair, you can, because you know the history of this chair, unless there's a smell to it or anything,
Right.
you can reuse it as it is.
Okay.
And it's already formed to that. Now, however, if you don't like that idea, you can put this in a pillowcase and wash it.
Okay.
Make sure it's a pillowcase that closes, though. You don't want the horsehair to come out.
Oh God, I
and
can
wash
imagine what that's going to look
it. That
like.
would
in the
make a
wa-
mess.
Yeah, and no more horsehair.
But you can clean horsehair, but the only thing with that is that you're in for a little bit more work, because then you have to repick the horsehair, and you have to put it on a handful at a time. That's how it was originally done. I'm just going to tear this back a little bit to show people. Just be careful, because we're going to reuse this. Let's just tear this back to show the horsehair. Oh, you know what? I'm surprised again, Jimmy, because this isn't horsehair.
What is it?
It's coconut fiber.
Coconut fiber.
Coconut fiber.
Which?
Not as good as horsehair.
Wow, I've been screwed again.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that you still can reuse this. This has some of the qualities of the horsehair where it has some bounce to it. It's still okay.
So for
for all our Hawaiian friends, we want to say it's still okay, Jimmy.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
I'll go with that for now.
So the coconut fiber is going to work. What we're going to do is you can reuse it. We're going to reuse that all as one after we restore it.
So again, is that any different from horsehair with as far as the care
It's a
of
little
it?
different. No, you can't really wash that.
Okay.
So if you had a problem with smell or anything and you were concerned with, we'd have to replace it.
Oh, okay.
We would have to
So
replace
there's no like soak it and let's see what.
No, not on coconut fiber. The horsehair, the quality of the horsehair is that it can be washed.
Okay.
And then when you wash it, it regains a lot of the spring.
Oh, good. Then, yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the bad news.
Jeez, I thought the chair was worth something.
So now I think what I'm going to do, unless do you have any more questions?
I don't. I think you've answered everything
Wow.
until the next class. So I should be ready to go, and I'll be thinking of my hairless horsehair now.
Well, let's have a nice round of applause for
Thank
Jimmy
you, everybody.
and our
Thank you so
sprawling
much.
audience. Jimmy's going to go sit down, but if Jimmy, I might call on Jimmy with some more questions about things. But I thought I would take the time, first of all, send in your questions. But I wanted to, we have I think a lot of the questions are geared towards supplies. So I'm going to go over that a little bit with you on supplies. So I'm really going to start with the basic, I'm going to go through my list here, right down from A to Z here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about adhesives. We'll start with adhesives. I'm a traditional upholsterer, I call myself, and a restorative upholsterer. I actually try not to use too much glue. I don't like spray glue. I'm not set up as a commercial upholsterer, so I'm much different than that. In the commercial world, they use a lot of spraying. They use a lot of new furniture manufacturing, things like that, where they need to use the glues. I try to stay away from the glues. However, I do use glues occasionally well, I would use a piece, if I'm trying to piece two pieces of foam together, and I do have one can of glue in the shop, and I'll use it for that. But other than that, I can't think of any other use for me. So you won't see it here a lot being used. So it depends on how you're setting up your shop. Are you a commercial upholsterer or are you a residential upholsterer? So that's a big difference. So we have barrier cloth. Barrier cloth is used mostly in commercial. It's a fire graded fabric, fiber usually, that some fire departments require. I don't get into that a lot too, because residentially I do not need to use fire retardant materials, believe it or not. So we just move down the list. Burlap. Okay. So if you've seen some of the YouTube videos, you know that I talk a little bit about burlap. There are two choices, maybe three choices for burlap. One would be the jute, one would be synthetic, and the other one would be a replacement burlap, like a piece of fabric that you would use to cover webbings and things like that. The best is the jute, and it just has that quality to it where it just loosens a little bit and works over the webbing. Usually that's all you're using it for. Nylon works too good. It doesn't stretch at all. And then what happens to nylon is it dries out and then it just fails completely. I've had nylon, it starts out as you could never rip a nylon burlap replacement. But then as it gets old, it just falls apart in your hand. So I wouldn't use that. And I wouldn't use a remnant piece of fabric. Again, it's too taut sometimes, where the burlap is a little loose and it works with your furniture. So so the next thing is button machine. So I have really industrial button maker here. I know that they're on the market. You have button making machines, but it fits in the palm of your hand. I highly would tell you do not use that, which presents a little bit of a problem for you guys who are just starting out. So where do you get your buttons made? Well, I always said if you have a neighborhood upholsterer and he likes coffee, or if he likes maybe cigars or something, although if you're an upholsterer you shouldn't smoke. But anyhow, be nice to him and ask him if you can use his button machine. A lot of upholsterers are more than willing to help you out, or they even make them for you if you're just starting out. But as you go along, you should invest in a good button machine that is secured to the table. I have it over here. But also with that button machine, you need dies. Actually, I can grab a hold of some of the dies there. Major malfunction on my shelving over there, Jimmy.
Well, we're gonna have to look into that, I think, next week sometime on our, cabinet show.
So what we have here is we have the loop part of the button goes in here, and the shell part of the button goes up here, and these are the dies that make your button. These are rather expensive, and you do need at least 3 sizes if you're going to be in business. This is a number 22 button, and then there's a medium one over this, and then a big one over that. And there are other ones. There were bigger ones that they don't make anymore. I wish I had them. They're bigger than silver dollar size, which occasionally I do need that. I'll end up hand making a button. And one of the online classes shows Jimmy, actually, I think Jimmy made a button.
Yes, I did.
Didn't you? A handmade button.
It was fun.
Yeah, they have to be big though. You can't make them small. You can't make a handmade small button. So that's that. So I hope you guys are learning a lot. I love this. I love these question and answers. And I love any question that you have. So we look down here at cambric. So that I guess there are 3 choices in cambric. One is cotton. The other one is Celestra, which is a synthetic. And the other one is any fabric that you have, or maybe muslin. I do use muslin sometimes. If I have an older piece of furniture that I'm doing in white, and it's off the floor a little bit, and I don't want them to see the black material, I'll use the white muslin on something like that. So that's a good replacement. But I like the cotton I use on antiques, definitely. The Celestra, it's a synthetic, it's black also for the bottom of chairs. That has great flexibility that you don't even have to cut around the leg sometimes. You just fold it around the leg and staple it. That's a real benefit. It actually looks neater. So then we have chalk. You'd be surprised. Chalk. I'm grabbing this chalk that I have here. Do not use school chalk. Do not use the chalk that they sell in arts and crafts stores unless it's a high powdered white chalk. Okay, this is specific to upholsterers, I think. So I'm getting powder on my hands just holding this. So what the unique thing about this chalk is that it doesn't stain 99.9% of the fabrics. I had one fabric that I used this chalk on and it stained it and I couldn't get it out, which was really weird. It's not supposed to stain the fabric, but the other good thing about this powdered chalk that we use is that you can point it out. You can point it out and get a finer, more powdered on it, and also a finer line. Now, some people have pencils that they have with the chalk. I don't like that because I think those stain. So you have to be careful with those. This shouldn't stain. And then if you still see it after your job is done somewhere, you can brush it off. And if that doesn't work, you could take a light cleaner and it cleans right off. Some fabrics it does kind of penetrate into, but it's the safest way to mark fabric. Never mark fabric with the magic marker or pen. So I'll tell you a little story about that. We had an upholsterer years ago. He upholstered, he marked all his cover with the new thing that came out. This was a few years ago, a black magic marker. So he put all his covers, all his markings on the fabric, and he upholstered it, and I delivered it. It was a wing chair. And a couple of weeks later, the customer called and said, help, something's really crazy wrong with my chair. It's got backwards words coming out on it. And this was scary for her. She equated that was, she was a little scared, Jimmy.
Like the chair was possessed?
Yeah, so I went out and I was looking at it, and sure enough, the moisture was humid at that point. It was in the summertime. It came right through the material and backwards letters right there, like outside back. How do you say outside back backwards, Jimmy? Quick.
Jesus was telling me something now.
Outside back backwards. Will you say that for me? I can't do it.
Oh, how about fruit flows? I always say that one myself.
Well, that's what it was all over. Seed.
Oh my God.
We'll do seed.
How much did it consume the chair?
Huh?
How much of it did it consume the chair?
The whole thing was.
Oh my God.
The whole thing was gone. I couldn't do it. We had to reupholster it and admit, this was a problem. It was a mistake. We apologized. The upholsterer apologized. We had never experienced this before. People this had never happened with this magic marker. You never use magic marker.
But most markers would have evaporated over time, like well over time, over years.
I don't know. It depends on the fabric too. This particular fabric was a very loosely woven fabric.
That's why it penetrated.
So it might have even been a Haitian cotton. Haitian cotton is, talk about double rub tests on it. Haitian cotton's probably got about 100 double rub tests. It's like really bad. So you have to be really careful. I don't see too many Haitian cottons anymore.
Okay.
Very loosely woven.
Maybe they took your hint.
Yeah, now after that. So we had to, redo that chair. The customer was happy the second time it was done. Now this wasn't the same customer, but this is a warning for people about residential furniture. Residential furniture does not have to be fire coated. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Although it doesn't have to be. If I have to use foam here, it is a fire-graded foam that I use, even though I'm not required to use it. Mm-hmm. So I still use it, because I think it's a better foam anyhow.
Is it a better foam?
It's a high-density foam, but it has the fire retardant.
Oh, okay.
And it's supposed to be environmentally friendly from what they tell me. So I'm good about using it, although I try to avoid redoing, if I can, redoing. If somebody has a foam cushion, and they want to redo it, oftentimes I talk them out of it. And maybe Dacron wrap it, we don't get as much money, but it's not all about money. Polyurethane is an oil-based product, foam, and it doesn't break down very well in the landfill. And it's not breaking down in your cushion. Oftentimes people think of the old latex cushions. The old latex cushions powder. Okay. And then they disintegrate, and then you see that powder on the floor.
Right.
That's from the latex. Latex is an organic material that will break down like that. The polyurethane hardly ever does.
Oh no, it's a plastic.
Yeah. So this is what we see in the oceans too, right, Jimmy?
That's why I use polyurethane on one of the refinishing projects I did. Yeah. I didn't like it. I go with shellac now.
Yeah.
Almost everything.
I mean, we have oceans full of plastics that. I think this is one of the good things about my industry, the upholstery industry, which has taken a big hit with new furniture. But what people have to remember, this new furniture ends up in the ocean, ends up as plastic in the ocean.
Right.
The components, a lot, especially the foam. I bet a lot of that foam, a lot of that so-called plastic that you see out there is little bits of foam. It's kind of gross,
Yeah, they make it cheaper, so they put in the plastic as fillers.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just going to check out to see how much time we have left. So what are we doing? Well, we're going until 5:30, and so we'll take your questions. I must be answering all their questions, Jimmy. You and I together.
You are too good today. You're beyond good, Ken. Today.
And we're only at C here on the alphabet here.
Oh my God! Everybody, grab another snack. Kevin will wait.
Now, if you're insomnia, if you're suffering from insomnia, I suggest you watch this and drink a little wine. No, I'm just kidding. Turkey. Heavy gravy.
Nice turkey sandwich. You're going to go right with it.
That'll put you to sleep.
Actually making me hungry now.
But there is a lot to learn in this industry, and I'm going through this list, and it reminds me of just how much there is. But we have fun too. So.
I got a question for you though, Kevin.
Sure.
When you start out doing your own shop, how much of this material should you have? Or how much of varying material?
You know what? I am happy to say that for anybody who wants to start a shop, they want to start in their house first. Never open up a brick and mortar store until you are very well prepared to do volume. Even if you're a good upholsterer, you've been doing it for 10 years. If you're not good in the volume end of things, you're going to have a problem. But the thing about a startup upholstery shop, I'll tell you, it's hardly any money. I mean, you can start up a home shop. If you're doing the compressor, that gets into a little bit of an expense, but no kidding, under $1,000, Jimmy.
Okay.
I know you start with we're going to be offering, it's a good question. Stay tuned to the Broadway Upholstery School website, not the YouTube channel, but on the website, we're going to be offering a kit, and I'm going to offer the kit with an instructional manual on how to build an ornament from A to Z, and I am going to give sources out. I'm only looking for the instructional end of things. I'm not looking to upcharge on materials, because I think there's a lot of people out there who want to start up but are afraid of the cost. So what we're going to do is we're going to offer the stool itself and the supplies at cost. So the only thing you're going to be paying for is the video and the instructions that I have a book that I wrote that's going to be offered with that. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about that. And that's a great question, Jimmy, about startup. So do you have a question about when one is ready to start taking work professionally? I mean, can you?
I would probably, I think what I would like to see a more of a, other than chairs and ottomans, sofas, I think you need to kind of gain some experience with regard to, again, how well you work with like, knowing your skill level and sewing skills and so on. So much of that is poured into your time and the money that you're going to make.
That's right.
And I think it's important that people kind of don't underestimate.
That's a whole other thing. So what Jimmy's talking about is how do you estimate work? I guess, we get people from, and I don't know anything about the overseas markets, we get people from New Zealand, we get people from Saudi Arabia, we get people from France, we get people from Australia, from all over, who are asking us questions about the work. But as far as what they get, I can't speak on that. But I can speak about in this country. Now, where I am, I'm on the East Coast. I'm in a kind of an expensive residential area, so I can demand a little bit more for my pricing. But there's all marketing questions and issues too that come up. But I'm a well solid business here. So where you are depends on what you can get, certainly. The best thing, and this is really important, if you're going to be starting up a shop, and become an expert in your field. Become an expert in upholstery. Become a teacher. What this kit that we just mentioned is going to be not only for the beginner, but with the instructional, it's actually a teacher's guide to teach people how to teach upholstery. And this is so important because if you open an upholstery shop and an upholstery adult ed class, let's say at night, and you have people come in, they're going to be your best customers. And you can be doing this kit with them. And you could be developing a business that way. That's the best way to start an upholstery business, in my opinion. Even if you're working out of your home. You can have 6 of your friends come in and do the upholstery. It's a lot of fun. It's about a 6-week, it's about 2 hours a day for 6 to 8 weeks, I would say. But it's a ball. We've done it, we've ran these classes, and we've gotten some really good positive feedback from it. So Jimmy, you got any other questions related? Jimmy's full of good questions today.
No, right. I mean, I'm just concerned about time and equipment, and I mean, it's great to say you have it in your garage or in your basement if you happen to have the room.
To follow up on that, as far as estimating goes, I have to say that unless you keep every minute, most people who are in this business and other businesses like it, like wood refinishes and the like, never keep track of their time. And if they did and they charged for it, I'm afraid that they would throw they wouldn't be able to compete in the furniture industry.
No.
So you must what they call break the code in your particular field, whatever it be, in upholstery. What that means is that you need to develop quickness as well as being good, and that's a combination that you have to work on. So the best way to do it is repetitive. Do as much work as you can in the beginning for yourself or your friends. I mean, you need to get your speed up. You really do, and that's how you can make a living at this business. But as far as estimating goes, it depends on where you are. The Boston area, I can tell you, the average price for a sofa in the Boston area is $1,400 labor. The average price for a fully upholstered chair is about $950 labor. The average price for a little slip seat in the Boston area is $90. So that said, you're going to have a lot of your customers maybe say to you, well, that's a little bit too expensive. And then you're going to have to work, if you want the job, you might have to work it out a little bit, maybe on the fabric end of things or something. But that's the other equation to this work is fabric. Fabric costs have to be kept down for somebody. You're competing with the furniture stores too when you're giving prices, and that's tough because they're getting all their labor almost on pennies. People are getting paid to put this together overseas, and their markup when it gets here, even with their big markup, and they're making money, is still less than what it would be in most cases, like lower medium quality furniture. It would be easy to replace. So I'm doing a lot of medium priced, moderate to high end furniture. That's what I do mainly, right?
Yes.
Did that answer? That was a long answer.
No,
I'm not sure if I directed you.
No, I mean, I think people have to realize the labor. I mean, they don't understand, especially upholstery is kind of a unique thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you deal with car mechanics, you deal with plumbers, you deal with, certain things around your house you deal with them maybe all the time. You hear about it much more than you would like in the upholstery world.
Right. You hear upholstery's a lot of mystery to the upholstery world, isn't there? The material.
You don't hear about people doing it too often.
Right.
Again, you're
Right.
dealing with a lot of furniture stores that are dealing with cheaper products. They're just as good, but they don't last as long. So you have a sofa, you think, 10 years, but well, it's about 6 to 7.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
material, they buy it and they put it together and it's supposed to last. But the furniture stores are asking for insurance now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're paying for that.
We have a question.
What is, this is from Blair.
Hi, Blair.
What is the difference in commercial fabric and standard fabric?
Commercial fabric and standard fabric. I have to tell you, when you talk about commercial fabric, you're talking about furniture store fabric. I have to tell you, be careful with that, because, like I think I already mentioned, the furniture stores aren't interested in selling you a piece of furniture that's going to be even if they call it an heirloom piece. Don't believe them. They're not interested in selling a 30-year piece of furniture. They're interested in selling a 10 to a 15-year, if you're lucky. Either the fabric's going to wear out or the frame underneath it's going to wear out, or both. Now the difference is night and day. You're talking about a first-run designer fabric, for instance. And the thing about going to a reputable fabric person is that they have all of the details of the fabric, like the double rub test that I mentioned, fiber content. That gives you a good idea that what the durability is going to be. But horsehair fabric, for instance, will last over 100 years. Leather will last over 100 years. Good leather. Be careful with leather out there today. Hope that answered your question, Blair. So, moving down the list here, we got clinchets. So clinchets, I'm going to grab my little clinchet here.
Oh boy.
This is a clinchet machine. Jimmy loves this. When Jimmy first saw this, he didn't know what this was. He almost left the upholstery shop because he said, "What is that going to do to me?" But this is a cool machine that anchors springs into webbing. And So the alternative to that is hand stitching springs down, which we do. On the ottoman that is going to be available, we show you both ways how to anchor springs down. But this is the easier, by far, this is the easier way. And what this does is there's little clinchets that are put in here. They're paper, they're held together by paper, each individual one. You line it up with the bottom. There's a little crescent moon shape on these. I don't know if you can see that. And that fits over the rung of the spring, over to the webbing. And so what you do is you push this down and you pull this trigger, and the clinchlet goes around the spring, and you need 3 of these in each spring, and that does the job.
So like a staple gun.
It's like a staple gun, right?
Yeah.
Big staple gun.
Thank God you were here for that first class I did, because I had no idea. Like, what?
Yeah. And there's a technique to use it. You got to push it in and then pull the trigger, and make sure your fingers aren't anywhere near that.
God forbid an injury in the upholstery world was just said years back.
Yeah. I'm gonna put that over here. And I'm just gonna check out the time to see where we're at. We've got a few more minutes. So feel free to ask your questions. I'm just gonna check out, Jimmy. I'm gonna give you this fabric before it gets damaged.
Okay, thank you.
So, when we're doing the online classes, a lot of subjects come up, which I think are great for somebody signing up for these classes. I think I really am proud of these classes. I think with all the experience I've had of teaching over the years, I've taught in a few capacities. I was adult education for many, many years throughout the Boston area. And also I did it as for people as a therapy. I was the upholsterer on site for people who had problems, who found it very restorative. And we have another question.
This is from the same person. Who are the guys you learned from, and is there a difference in furniture from Europe and America?
Yeah, I learned from, I was very lucky. I didn't realize at the time, I was a young man, I was about 18, so that was actually starting out when you think that father and son passed the trades along. That was a little late starting, you know. Usually in the old tradition was you get a kid 6, 7 years old and you're starting to train them. So by the time they're 18, they're probably, you know, journeymen. But I learned from really cool guys. They're all Jewish, and they were Yiddish speakers. I didn't understand what some of the words they were calling me, but I knew that their heart was true, and I really enjoyed working with them.
You sure it was all good things, Ken?
Oh, well, probably not. Probably not. Yeah, this is a
Well,
goofy.
do you remember any of those phrases as they raised their hand and clenched their fist?
I was just a goofy, you know, lanky, you know, late teenager trying to, you know, just goofing off, you know. So there's probably a lot of those words probably we don't want to repeat, right? But anyhow, they were great guys, and they were some were survivors of the Holocaust. Some were people fleeing Europe from the Holocaust, so or both. But they were great guys, and you know, I came in the industry in the late '70s, or mid '70s, late '70s, and they were all probably, you know, in their '70s themselves, you know. But they were great guys. They had a lot of knowledge, and if you just really had to work at getting on their good side, and they would show you things. As far as the European traditions, I used to think that, being mostly Jewish, I used to think Old Testament, and I used to think that if you trace their lineage back, these guys were probably, their forefathers were probably making tents, so they were probably tent makers. And I love that connection historically, I really do, to this trade and to the privilege that I had working with these guys. And I'm trying to pass this on to you guys. So thank you, Blair. That was a great question. I hope I answered it. Do you think I answered it, Jimmy?
I think you did well. Well, that'll probably come out in your autobiography, right? We can do that. That's the next project.
Oh yeah, maybe you can write that for me, Jimmy.
Oh sure.
Jimmy's one of my
4 or
biggest
5 pages.
fans. By the way, the audience over there, wow, there's a lot of, tell those people to quiet down.
Right, everybody, Kevin speaking.
Okay. So we got, the next thing is on my list here. I'm kind of skipping a few things, but is cotton. So cotton is a batting as well as the horsehair is a batting. Dacron's a batting. Foam even can be considered a heavy batting. Rubberized horsehair, hay, coconut fiber like Jimmy has in his chair. There's many things that act as a batting. But what is a good batting? That's what you have to decide. And not all synthetics are bad. I was today showing people how to do Dacron, which is a synthetic over foam, which works out pretty good in some cases. But cotton as a batting for underneath the fabric, I think is the best. As long as the fabric, it can't be like this Marimekko, because even the good AAA, I use a AAA cotton batting that has very few seeds in it. But on a Marimekko like this, you'd be able to maybe see the seeds. So you have to be careful where you use it. On heavier upholstery fabrics, it's the best batting underneath the fabric. So that's what I use. So I think we're almost finished up. I'm going to ask people if they have one more question. Any questions, now would be the time. And I would ask Jimmy if he had any more, one more question, Jimmy.
No, I think you've gone over all the equipment. I think it's important to know what you're getting into.
We only got to the C's on
That's
the
okay.
Still 8 minutes before.
So we're going to go a little bit longer because there's 8 minutes I've been told. So I might as well just keep reading down the list.
See if you can get the Z by the time the 8 minutes is up.
Yeah, and there is a Z. And do you know what that Z is? There's
No.
2 Z's. What do you think they are?
It's just, tell me. You
We can skip ahead. No, come on, think. I'll tell you right now that you use one every day when you wake up.
Zipper?
Yes. Now the other one. You're familiar with this. You've heard the term. I'll give you a hint. It's a type of a spring.
With the Z?
Yeah.
I'm having a brain fart. What is it?
It's zigzag.
Zigzag.
Zigzag springs. So it's just a piece of metal that a machine just zigzags all along like this.
Yeah.
And it's got an open end here, an open end here, and you have zigzag clips. I don't use these, folks. I don't like them. I don't think they do a great job.
Have I seen these before?
You've seen them in furniture, and usually you'll see them after they're starting to come out of a piece of furniture. Because I had a wing chair in here the other day from a very nice couple, where all the zigzag springs were hanging out because they had broke. The clip had broke. There's so much tension on them that the clip breaks. So they wanted me to fix the chair, so the only thing I could do is there were 2 more that were still attached. I took them all out, and I filled the hole in at the bottom of the chair with foam, and I webbed the very bottom of the chair, so that it basically, that the upholstery was in good shape. Mm-hmm. So it basically saved the chair, and they didn't have to spend too much money. They didn't want me to put coil springs in. Coil springs don't always work in a frame like that has zigzag springs. That's another story for another time. But so you got one Z word, Jimmy.
I'm sorry. Again, I didn't pick up the Upholstery on Broadway appendage.
That's okay. These aren't very readily available. That's why we're doing these,
Well,
these
that's what I
online
say.
classes.
You have you should put out Upholstery Monthly with all the terms.
Well, we will be doing a blog.
Okay.
And our first blogs are going to kind of catch people up to who I am and what I've done in the past. Actually, one of the things that I'll show you right now, it was very interesting, was I posted Napoleon's chair. And I'll just show you that news article. Now, we don't have too much time to talk about this, but I'm very proud of this. We were featured in Upholstery Journal, and we upholstered Napoleon's chair. And what the cool thing about this is, from a historical standpoint, is that upholstering his chair. While I was upholstering the chair, this chair was at Helena Island. Was it St. Helena? I think St. Helena is where Napoleon died.
Yes.
Where the English had him imprisoned on an island. The jail wasn't good enough. They needed a whole island to contain the man, right? But this chair was
worthy of it.
Yeah. But this chair was next to his deathbed. And this gentleman here, I don't know if the camera can see that, was sitting on Napoleon's, on the very chair that we upholstered.
Really?
Can you believe that? Now we're talking in the 1820s, right?
So he was famous for.
So while we were upholstering this chair, we spent a lot of attention and detail to see if there was anything inside that chair that could solve the crime of Napoleon's death, because it was said that Napoleon was poisoned, and so we kept our eyes. We had the little bags, you know, the little CSI bags, and
Did you have a blue light?
We
Had the powder with the blue light?
No, we didn't have that. We didn't go that far.
That was your downfall. You probably didn't
Yeah.
solve the mystery. Right?
Well, we didn't solve it. There was nothing. The chair had been probably upholstered 12 times, so.
Well, you never know. If you watch Quincy Engineer.
Yeah, so we have, let me tell you, upholstery can be an exciting industry. You know, you never know what comes up, and that come through that door, anytime can come a special project. So I think that's going to do it. I really thank you for Jimmy. I want to really thank Jimmy. He's been a real trooper, and the rest of the studio audience back there. And so this ends this question and answer session. We'll see you next time. Thanks.